history is really nothing to sneer at. Gretchen and I were driving here this morning and going through the can of worms. There was a big billboard, some bank advertising itself, and says, most trusted for 2 years. I thought they paid money for that. Excuse me. You get so lost. We all get so lost in our own bubbles. We can't see ourselves as other people see us. And of course, this is what's so wonderful about the Buddhist path, is this, it said in our prayer, the 84,000 different dharmas. It can be overwhelming, especially, like a Tibetan center, especially because the Tibetans were fortunate, and they're really unique in the history, that they consciously decided, it was from the top down. The emperor said, okay, we're going to be Buddhists now. Of course, I'm exaggerating, but nonetheless, it was from the top down. So they systemically took the full range of Buddhist teachings as they existed at their peak, 1,500 years after the Buddha passed away in India. So 1,500 years, the full cultural development, flowering of this radical insight that he had. And the Tibetans translated that in Tibetan. They developed the written Tibetan language, which they had not had before. So there's the full range of the teachings. Now, this is great because these 84,000 different options can be very confusing to people. Do I do this? Do I do that? What's going on here? It's a measure of how we naturally see the world in a fractured state. This world of multiplicities, this world of dharmas with a small d from Sanskrit, appearances, the scientific world, it just gets more and more complicated. The farther we go with our telescopes, the more galaxies there are to see. The deeper we go in, the more subatomic particles there are to see. And then in our life, it's just too much going on. We live in the most materially, the most fortunate time ever. And ain't nobody happy. Doesn't that teach us something? That maybe the answer is not just in having whatever AI take over our lives or whatever the next technological panacea is. I saw an advertisement once, a copy of an advertisement, when the telephone first came out in the early 1900s. And some, opinionator, someone who has some sort of authority that you could get printed in the newspaper, was saying that this would be world peace because now people could talk to each other. A few years later, World War I came about. So tell me about, if you're speaking from a point of ignorance, you just multiply the ignorance. You have to go to the root. And that's what the Buddha Dharma does. And so out of all this complexity, seems like that, but the more you practice with this, suddenly it becomes one thing instead of 84,000 things. And that one thing has this label of bodhicitta. Bodhi means awakening, citta means mind. Mind means our ordinary mind. Nothing esoteric there at all. Bodhicitta. But it's the full deal. There's absolute bodhicitta, which is the recognition of the actual nature of our mind and abiding in that recognition. Even to call it a recognition sounds like it's something apart from us. It's closer to us than our eyes. So there's absolute bodhicitta, but how do you get there? Through what's called relative, conventional bodhicitta. As us Americans, we're well educated as a people. Although how well that takes and how deep that education goes is questionable. But nonetheless, when we hear conventional bodhicitta, I don't want that. I want the absolute bodhicitta because that's higher, that's better. It's understandable. That's what we do as sentient beings. We're always grasping after something. But Nagarjuna, this great Buddhist master in India, in the 200s, I think, somewhere back there, said that the conventional bodhicitta is the way to the absolute bodhicitta. So in a worldly sense, the conventional bodhicitta is more valuable. And what is conventional bodhicitta? This is the one thing that we have to practice. We're training our mind in this conventional bodhicitta, because mind is the king. The words we speak, the Tibetans say that our words are just like the minister. You've got the head of a government is like the king, and then the minister is just doing the will of the king. So that's our speech. It comes out of mind. And our body is like the servant. That's just following along the mind. So this is a radical understanding, because the mind, when the Buddha speaks about mind, it's not just these thoughts that we're having. It's the nature of the mind with a capital M. And so this teaching on bodhicitta, what is it, the conventional teaching? Well, first is the wish. And this is so radically upside down from us, our ordinary behavior. It's the wish to lead all beings to Buddhahood. You're going to take every single one of them. This is the earthworms. So it's like the thought, I want to go to Washington, D.C. You have to have that aspiration. But then there's engaging bodhicitta, engaging conventional bodhicitta, which is taking a step towards Washington, D.C. This is the practice of the 6 perfections. That's what these bowls represent on the shrine. The first 2 are preliminary to them, drinking water, and then washing water. If a great person came to your house in ancient India, first you would offer them tea, and then you would wash their feet. So those are the first 2. But then the next 6 are the 6 perfections. This is what the Dalai Lama teaches publicly. This is what Khenpo teaches publicly all the time. It's the conventional bodhicitta. And what is it? Well, first is giving. And the teachings are this is where the 84,000 comes in. The teachings are so articulated that we can relate to them. So for instance, with giving, isn't it interesting that it starts with giving? Because this clinging that we do to ourselves, the source of our suffering, the first thing to erode it a little bit is giving. And the first level of giving is giving material benefit to people. You do this to your family all the time. You're feeding the kids. You can do it with a homeless man on the street. You can do it in a million ways, giving for the whales, whatever it is. But you have to break that absolute attachment to ourself. The enemy of giving, Lama Tarchin said, is stinginess. It's the sense that I gave and I gave too much. Or you only give with conditions. I want to get tax write-off, whatever it is. It's like imperfect, but that's all right. Better than nothing. So first is the giving of material benefit, support, whatever. The second level of giving is protection from fear, which is said to be more profound. And that's a wonderful thing. Anne Frank comes to the door and you say, come on in. It's very profound. But even to, catch the spider and put it outside, whatever, we can practice this on our daily lives. But the third level of giving is the giving of Dharma. And this is incalculable. We really don't know the extent of these benefits. So this is the start of engaging conventional bodhicitta. Shantideva in his great work says that once one has engaged with this conventional bodhicitta, the mind you instantly become a son or daughter of the Buddha. And it's said that waves of benefit will come, even when you're drunk, even when you're asleep. And he tells the story of a hooker in ancient India who thought it'd be really funny to put on a nun's robes and prance around for one of her clients. The contrast was just like, isn't that the source of humor? This big contrast of what's going on. Charlie Chaplin doing Hitler, it's so funny, the contrast. So she danced around like that, ha, 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 ha. It's said that the robes, the merit of those robes was such that she was reborn in a heavenly realm. The thing about this is that this is all based on cause and effect. Buddha's realization, his fundamental teaching is cause and effect. If you do the cause, you get the effect. One Lama here said, Khenpo, one great Khenpo, said it's like falling downhill. You may say, I don't believe in gravity, but if you jump off the cliff, you're going down. It's a natural process, which takes all the weight off of us having to manipulate reality. We don't have to meditate and think, I am meditating. Of course, we all do. But it's the actual non-conceptual part of our mind that is the benefit going on there. And so you don't have to get into judging yourself. Oh, I'm having thoughts. In a practical way, we just follow the instructions. When we realize we're distracted, that is our mindfulness. That is our awareness that we're being unmindful. So we go back to mindfulness, the remembering of the object of meditation again and again and again. And of course, with 84,000 different objects of meditation, people can naturally feel kind of overwhelmed. This is kind of like, nuclear science here. I mean, it's just like vast. I don't know about you, but I started bombing out on mathematics and physics when I was in high school. This is getting too difficult right now. And then you see what these people have done going further with it. Well, this is like this. It's offering this huge educational system, but it's also just many, many tools, any one of which you can pick up. So you will find your own way throughout all this. And you should not feel any pressure to have to find anything. You just keep doing. But the core is bodhicitta. If you're practicing in this way, this aspiration, something outside of ourselves, aspiration, because we save ourselves. The Tibetans did a great thing too, in that they systematized their presentation of the Buddha Dharma, which is very helpful because it is overwhelming. It was overwhelming for them. I mean, here you had this culture. They were like Genghis Khan. They had conquered China, the capital of China at any rate. That's how Buddhism came to Tibet. The Chinese emperor gave his daughter as sort of a war prize wife to the emperor of Tibet. And she was Buddhist. She brought the first Buddha statue to Tibet. So they didn't know what they were doing, but they did a really good job of kind of setting this foundation and keeping it going, as they still do. This systematized structure sort of that they give us has been very helpful to someone like me. It starts with renunciation. The Buddhist path is one of renunciation, then love and compassion, then wisdom, pure wisdom itself. And so this is very helpful because you get help in how do you approach this. This renunciation is so important. And the term that they use in both Sanskrit and Tibetan literally means emerging from the swamp. It doesn't mean giving up everything good in your life, giving up fun, giving up all the things that you like. Not at all. It's emerging from the swamp. Instead of this constant betrayal and disappointment, running around circles. This word samsara is a pretty good image. Instead of that, now suddenly purposeful in our life. And because of that seemingly constructed, fabricated meaning, the greatness of it is that it might seem to be fabricated on the surface, but it's not. It's something fundamental to us. So this is very helpful because you can see in your own life this need for renunciation. What does renunciation mean? Well, it means, for one thing, basically the basic meaning is to stop harming others and stop harming ourselves. So we stop harming. And it means that we drop all our manipulations. In a sense, it's kind of funny because in a sense, Dharma itself is kind of a manipulation. I'm going to do this, and I'll get to some sort of freedom, and then I'll get beyond that to enlightenment and realizations, and that's okay. Someone asked Lama Tarchin once, well, we're supposed to be without attachment. Is an attachment to Buddhahood attachment? And he said, yeah, that's the only good one. And this is the genius of it. Out of these 84,000, out of these multiplicities, the whole scientifically revealed world of dharmas with a small d, meaning appearances, phenomenon, there is dharma with a capital D, or what the Tibetans called the sublime dharma. The appearances that are actually helpful, All of these things are an emanation, you might say, of our true nature. But a lot of it is stained by our own interpretation. We're looking at things through a lens that is stained. The Tibetans say it's like jaundice, suddenly everything looks an orange color. And the practices are just removing those stains. And because we are inherently pure, we're guaranteed success. To the point that even if you go a whole lifetime with distraction, but somehow this fundamental faith, confidence in Dharma, fundamental confidence that the Buddha wasn't drunk, he wasn't insane, he wasn't on a power trip, that what he was teaching was valid. To the extent that someone goes their whole life with that kind of confidence and yet somehow doesn't really get much practice accomplished, doesn't matter, because that connection is such that, and it is so rare in this vast universe, the sublime dharmas will take you there. So at death, all these attachments we have all the time, we're just so attached to our body. You can be having the highest kind of philosophical thought, but it's like, oh, I got a hangnail. I mean, suddenly you're lost, right? You're feeling really good in the morning. It's like this. It's sunny. You're just great. You got a new girlfriend. You're feeling tremendous. You're walking down the street. Everybody's smiling. And then one person says, are you gaining a little weight? What do you think about the rest of the day? Oh my, I need some sort of program. Something wrong with me. We're so wired. This is our evolution. We don't deny any of that. But how we have evolved as far as evolutionary fitness, we see what keeps this corpse going. It's a limited understanding. We don't reject any of that. But the Buddha Dharma, our realization, is more than that. It encompasses all of that. In fact, it encompasses the lives, struggles, sufferings of all sentient beings. It's mind-boggling. So in the midst of this, we have teachers who have been trained in a traditional way. We live in a very fortunate time because these great teachers are passing away. And yet we still have the teachings. The Buddha nature is still there. These things come and go, so to speak. But we live in a degenerate time. There's no doubt about it. Every time I see some sort of, like foreign policy thing or something, someone who's criticizing different things in the world, when they criticize China, for instance, they always talk about the Uyghurs and completely on the side of the Uyghurs, but they never even mention Tibet anymore. This is the worldly way. If you don't have your cameras showing some sort of outrage, it just falls away from people's mind. So too with the teachings on the Dharma. They ebb and they flow. But the teachings themselves are beyond birth and death. And we live in a fortunate time when these teachings exist. And truly, there are realized people to one degree or another. So I wanted to read you something from the translator's introduction from Garchen Rinpoche, is transmitted to us, this Vajrakalaya practice. And we've got a retreat happening later this month in a couple of weeks. They're starting to construct the 3-dimensional mandala. So the mandala is a picture of your mind. And to help people in practice, they will draw out a picture. But it actually represents a 3-dimensional visualization. So again, we start with renunciation, not harming. The next step is conventional, with our own dualistic, ordinary mind. Wanting others to be happy, that's love. Wanting others to be free of suffering, that's compassion. And then wanting all sentient beings to come to this deathless love and compassion that's beyond birth and death. That's bodhicitta. So that's compassion. But then the third kind of this structure that the Tibetans put together of wisdom, pure wisdom. Can you practice pure wisdom right now? Now, because we have Buddha nature, or as it says in the Kala Chakra Tantra, all sentient beings are Buddhas. Apart from that, there are no Buddhas. So because we are Buddhas right now, but we just don't know it, it's valid for us to imagine ourselves as a Buddha. And then what happens is that the qualities of the Buddha, because we're abiding our mind in these sacred forms, it just naturally starts penetrating your life to one degree or another. Doesn't have to be anything spectacular. You've heard me tell the story about one of our members who years ago was a psychiatrist, and this is before cell phones, and he would get on the phone, once a week with his mother, and he, as a psychiatrist, of course, he always got in fights with his mother on the phone. A whole lot of samsara there, I'm sure, but nonetheless. So after 6 months of coming to White Lotus, the Dharma Center, he, in the midst of he was screaming at his mother on the phone. And in the midst of his scream, he thought to himself, I'm supposed to be practicing patience. And what stunned him was that he couldn't stop. He just kept on screaming. This is the power of our habitual mind that we see in our meditation. But what was different was that it sort of cut the root out of it. Instead of it being 100% anger at mom, fully self-righteous, fully I'm going to make this happen, fully I'm going to tell her where she's at, all of that, 100% confidence. Instead, there was a bit of doubt, and that doubt was wisdom. I'm not supposed to be doing this. I have enough confidence in the Buddha's teachings that I think there's some validity here. Even if I just think maybe there's some validity, it cuts into that hermetically sealed bubble that we live in. The other image I use is like, of course I date myself, but like movies, frame after frame after frame, pushing it through a machine with light going through, some wisdom, some light. And you see this display going on. It looks totally real up on the screen. And you see Marlene Dietrich, she's there from moment to moment to moment. You don't see the moments. You just see a solid Marlene Dietrich. That's something I could fall in love with. But it's just individual moments. So too in our mind, individual moments, it comes up. It's not even articulated. It's just this root kind of confidence. People say, I don't have any faith. Look at the faith that we have right now. Every moment, I'm Frank, I'm Frank, I'm Frank. Blah, 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 blah. I make Frank by my mind into a solidly existing thing that is somehow apart from every other creature in the world. And the whole universe is evaluated in terms of, is this good for Frank? Is this bad for Frank? We're going, this is dualism. This is what we do. The Buddhist teaching is that that's not the fundamental state. That's a fabricated reality. So when you visualize yourself as Tara, you're cutting, even just for an instant. And in your meditation, of course, you find out how powerful our habitual distracted state is. Because, I'm not Tara. A million voices telling you you're not Tara. You have Tara for a moment or no moments. If you're like me, you can be practicing for days. And then suddenly, what was the visualization about? But the effort of doing that, you wouldn't be doing that except for some level of understanding, faith in bodhicitta that you have. The appearance of Tara is bodhicitta. We are the mind of the Buddha. The clarity is something that we strive for. Some people do that kind of thing easily. Sometimes that's an obstacle for them. They do it too easily. But nonetheless, the clarity of the form, all the different aspects of the form, the knowledge of what that all symbolizes, basically bodhicitta, and then the Vajra pride, this pride that we have, this natural kind of arrogance that we have in ourselves. There's a good pride, and that's the pride that I do have Buddha nature. This is not just a big farce that I'm doing, and it's actually the highest. So, Rinpoche has given us this practice to do, and this is from the translator's introduction. Ari Kiev, who's a good friend of the Dharma Center, has been here. And let's see. If I can find it in my own book, right? Yeah. It is taught that after cultivating precious bodhicitta and training in the progressive stages of the path, one can enter the door of the secret mantra. First receiving empowerment, then transmissions, and finally practice instructions. This mode of spiritual development is fundamentally relational in its approach. It depends on the human connection between guru and disciple. Indeed, this is how Garchen Rinpoche and countless other realized lineage masters were gradually initiated onto the mantric path. Now as ever, practitioners who aspire to become like them would do well to emulate their approach to the teachings. Because Garchen Rinpoche's actions are shaped by both extreme love and extreme pragmatism, they can sometimes be unorthodox and difficult to fathom. Ever cognizant of how fleeting human life is and how rare the conditions are to meet with and receive the sublime Dharma, Rinpoche fulfills without delay the wishes of those who approach him with interest. He offers lovingly and in good faith that which he has received. He has often spoken of his firm commitment to not investigate disciples' good and bad qualities or spiritual histories. Again, his firm commitment to not investigate disciples' good and bad qualities or spiritual histories. Only the Buddhas can know an individual's karma and fitness to receive any teaching. In this regard, maintaining unwavering trust in the sources of refuge, Dharma guardians, and the workings of causality, Garchen Rinpoche considers a person's interest in and access to the Dharma sufficient indications of his or her karmic connection. Because this manual, speaking of the book here, includes secret teachings, I asked Rinpoche about the threshold for readership. Now, for instance, this threshold, Dalai Lama, for instance, studied some 13 years on the sutric, the ordinary, the conventional teachings, before he was introduced to the tantric teachings. And then we have Gar Rinpoche showing up here and giving these kind of tantric teachings. So people often feel like, whoa, that's what he's talking about here. All right, because this manual includes secret teachings, I asked Rinpoche about the threshold for readership. He responded with the following words, quote, "It is said that compassionately looking with a long-range view on the future time of dregs," that's the times we're in, degenerate time, the Buddhas taught mantric sadhanas, mantric practices. Today, that future has become manifest. Right now is the time of dregs, in which secret mantra teachings must be propagated. As Guru Padmasambhava prophesied, when the wicked era burns like fire, the potent force of secret mantra will blaze forth. Because of this is back to the translator, because of this, and because it is far better to receive the Buddha's teachings than not, Rinpoche has offered the instructions herein without demanding prerequisites like empowerment. Maintaining pure perception without investigating or discriminating, he has given the Dharma with an open hand. This is one of the ways in which he upholds his commitment to beings and to the sources of refuge. It is not his style to offer the Buddha Dharma in a prescriptive way, establishing and policing rules of conduct. Instead, disciples must mature beyond outwardly imposed dictates, taking personal responsibility for our own actions, which are to be tempered by love and heedfulness of cause and effect. Thus, how we approach, receive, and integrate Rinpoche's instructions, how we uphold our own samaya, our own commitments, is a matter we must ultimately determine for ourselves. It's like the farther you go with this and you realize the profundity of these teachings, the extreme value of them. You know, again, the Buddha didn't teach much of the Tantra in his own lifetime. The times, it wasn't the time for them. But the second Buddha Rinpoche in Tibet prophesized that there would be a time of degeneration and a time when virtue is often regarded as non-virtue and non-virtue regarded as being virtuous, and when the afflictive emotions would be extremely rough and people would be lost. And this was the time that the Tantra teachings were especially necessary. So the fact that you come here and feel overwhelmed by 84,000 teachings, I mean, what the hell is going on? What do these things mean? What is all of this? That's actually an indication of why these teachings are for right now, why you're actually in the right place. All those doubts are conquerable. Doubt is not the fundamental situation, and yet doubt is beneficial to us because it's an open mind, not the kind of snarky doubt that is looking for reasons to continue clinging, looking for reasons to destroy whatever is out there. Again, like, solutions looking for a problem. Not like that. Instead, it's the doubt of a great scientist, keeping the mind open. We don't close our accounts with reality, but we have this fundamental confidence. Seems to be something of benefit here, and so we practice. Even through the hours of boredom, the hours of distraction, there is benefit happening. It's training the mind. And so it's said, like a death, like I was getting to before, we have such a connection to our body, such a distraction into our body and our stream of thoughts. It's where we live. But at death, body's gone. Tibetans say, and the Tantric teachings say, that without that attachment, because the body, the object of the attachment's gone, the mind they have some number for it. It's like either 13 or 19 times more powerful. I kind of laugh at the mathematical precision, but nonetheless, the mind is kind of like freed. Now, this is a great opportunity, but a great danger, because when the mind is free like that, you have a thought of hatred. Man, you can go there. And of course, cause and effect, that affects your next rebirth. But conversely, if you know the objects of virtue, and the mind has been trained, or just confidence in, you know that even though I'm involved in all this distraction, you know that somehow it's just like adventitious winds. It's like the clouds covering the sun. You have this confidence in the sun, no matter how many clouds you're seeing. Then that's tremendous power at death and after death. That freedom, that 13 or 19 times more powerful, is can be taken advantage of, can be used. So there's nothing wasted. There's nothing wasted in the Buddha Dharma. In the Pure Land sects, they talk about all that repetition of Buddha Amitabha's name. It's like at death, it all kind of like, focuses all that merit, all that effort. It just kind of crystallizes in tremendous power at death. So never, never be discouraged. Okay. So that's enough, but I wanted to read that from Gar Rinpoche, because often when we build a mandala like this, and people are teachings on Vajrakalaya, which, is a very high esoteric kind of practice, people think, oh, that's, they judge themselves too harshly, not to worry about any of that stuff. There's no mistake in cause and effect. The fact that you're having contact with any of this, no matter whether you're practicing it or not, is a benefit and is right. Lama Tarchin said, it's very much like you're drowning in the middle of a lake, and somehow, the Buddha throws a rope to you from the shore, and you're grabbing onto that rope. And Lama Tarchin said, you naturally kind of want to get out of the lake, so you're pulling yourself towards, but sometimes you get tired and you rest. Some people are like hell-bent for leather, pulling, other people are going slow, whatever. He says, it doesn't matter. Just don't let go of the rope. That's what we're trying to inculcate here. Okay, let's take a break. But first, if there are any questions, we can take a few questions if anybody has any. Yeah, maybe. Do you have the mic? Yeah, good.
I have the mic. Yeah, great. I was just wondering, this is just kind of silly, is there a benefit between making a difference between meditative practice or sitting and just sitting? You know, the idea of the Bodhidharma concept of just sitting,
Yeah.
and then meditative practice being more directed.
Yeah.
And that if we make a distinction that way, that it can sometimes be more helpful. And then the other question I had dealt with a question of nibbana. I mean, if the bodhisattva path is vowing to return until all sentient beings are freed from come to enlightenment, isn't nibbana kind of the idea that not so much that everything changes, but we change, consciousness changes.
Mm-hmm.
There's one could even say a degree of acceptance through deep knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
and that nothing really endemically physically changes.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to
Yeah.
discuss that for
Well,
a second.
first, the distinction between, it's true, like Bodhidharma just staring at the wall, right? Not staring, but sitting at the wall. And that's Dzogchen. You sit and you do nothing. Just relax your mind. Don't do anything. It's the hardest thing in the world. And then you have the thought, hey, I'm not doing anything. That's a thought. Hey, I'm thoughtless. That's a thought. And you start seeing, oh my God, this is like much harder. So, although that's our natural state, the Buddha then taught all these techniques because we need techniques, because we have more confidence in a technique. And it's also helpful. It's like getting through the swamp here. Go here first. You don't see outside of the swamp yet, but you're still doing. So what happens? Well, all the practice of meditation is just shamatha and vipassana, calming the mind, concentration meditation, and insight meditation. That's the whole deal. And it starts out with mindfulness and awareness. Ngaren Rinpoche says that we're trying to be mindful, whatever the object of our meditation is. In that word mindfulness in Sanskrit and Tibetan is the root for remember. So we're remembering the object of meditation, whether it's counting our breaths, whether it's breathing, whether it's the visualized, whatever. And then, of course, we lose it. It's our awareness that catches it. So Ngaren Rinpoche says it's like you have an incense stick, little burning end of it. And when that thought comes up, that you realize you're distracted, the incense stick, the awareness dissolves that. You go back to the mindfulness, awareness, these two together. So it's like a two-handed kind of thing going on. But eventually the mindfulness goes away because the awareness is getting more and more. And it's just awareness. So Dzogchen or Bodhidharma facing the wall is just the practice of pure awareness. It's hard for us to believe that that's Buddhahood. We want bells and whistles. So the Buddha gave us some bells and whistles. We can do all sorts of stuff. We can do Dharma dances. We can have all with shrines, and they're helpful. But they're more than just mere process. They are our Buddha nature in a way that we can relate to it more easily. The only reason the Buddhas take birth, this Nirmanakaya, this flesh and blood existence, is said to be the deceptive truth. Because it looks like an old man sitting under a tree in India. Nothing special there. And for a lot of the people, his cousin tried to kill him twice. So, he looked like a human being too. But then, and it's as far as, yes, it's the transformation of our mind. Beyond consciousness, actually. The transformation of our mind. That's exactly right. It's said when Khenpo Sherab gives the teaching of, you go down like all the horror movies you've ever seen, hey, let's go down to the basement. And you're saying, no, don't go down to the basement. And they go down to the basement with this mindful of fear. Every shadow you see is a demon, is Freddy, whatever, you have this mindful of fear. So you project fear. What we don't see is that we're projecting all of that stuff. Not that there aren't outer things that are projecting it too. But we have this basic, fundamental, karmic debt, so to speak, And then there are the secondary conditions that trigger it. So it's like we're walking around, we're full of gasoline, and someone throws a match and we explode. We blame the guy throwing the match. Now, he had a role in it, yes. But the bigger thing that caused that big explosion, there'd be no big explosion. And then people throwing matches, this is the acceptance of cause and effect. Even just the conceptual, the ordinary acceptance of cause and effect lessens your pain. Because instead of, why is this shit happening to me? Who's that person? I mean, we have a friend who had an aunt who hadn't spoken to another one of her sisters for 20 years. Nobody in the family remembered what the dispute was about. But it was just going on and on and on. And these are very hard. And especially when the good thing is to see it, our own difficulties with our parents, with our loved ones, with our kids, with our country, with whatever it is, we start to see that in a different way. So you're absolutely right. It's about changing us, because when you're going down in that basement, but your heart is full of love and compassion, the Buddhas appear. Freddy Krueger looks like a wrathful Buddha. It's very powerful. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's take a break and we'll come back after tea.